Right, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. It is the bottom line. We say business at the speed of thought. And my name is Kwesi, of course. I'm your host for the show. And you can join us. Let's get interactive tonight on the show. You can join us via a text message or WhatsApp on our WhatsApp line or our SMS line, which will scroll on the screen very shortly. Tonight, we are discussing the media review budget. We are expecting it very soon to be read in Parliament by the Minister of Finance, Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta. What are you expecting in the year? How has the first half of the year gone for you so far? Has it been stable? We have all seen the macroeconomic indicators so far. We've all seen the micro as well. And the issues have been around post-COVID experience all the time when we talk about the economics of the country. But for you, how does it look like? How is it going? How is it looking like? We'll be focusing also on special sectors of the economy. We'll be assessing agri, we'll be assessing startups doing business here in Ghana in this current post-COVID era. We will be looking at how AFCFTA is impacting the economy. We'll be looking at energy sector and, of course, the other sectors of the economy. Then we may even start with the release from the Ministry of Finance, which presupposes that we are going round, technically, we are going for a second round of a debt exchange program. What do you make of this? And the claim, or the ministry claims, that this is part of the arrangements with the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and the impact that we are supposed to receive as a country and the things all of us are supposed to go through. So stick and stay with us tonight. My guests will be seated here pretty shortly, and when they do, it's generally about the economy. It's generally about the upcoming budget and what people think and what you think as well. You want to share your comments with us, and let's get interactive. Stay with us. My name is Kwesi. Right, so you're welcome back from the break, and I'll get straight to the discussions. And I told you that tonight we want to be very interactive. Our numbers will be on the screen pretty shortly, so you want to send in your SMS what you make of the Ministry of Finance release on a new exchange program, which they say is part of the IMF conditions or IMF arrangement with the country, and for us to be able to go through safely. We will, on the second half, be discussing issues around the mid-year review budgets. You know what the mid-year review budget has been. It's been conventional. Either the government comes back to Parliament to request for more funds or a top-up of funds on their expenditure, and whether they will come and say that, okay, we are managing the economy prudently, and so we are not going for any further requests from Parliament to augment the budget for the year or expenditure for the year. And so tonight, my guests are already seated. Let me introduce my guest here in the studio, and then I'll go online and begin the discussion online. Then I will come back to the studio. So I will begin from my immediate left. He's our very own man, the Public Relations Officer of the Ghana Union of Traders Association, Mr. Joseph Paddy. Good evening, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening. Let me say good evening to your viewers and your listeners.
If there is no issue, we don't meet. We only meet on. But I hope we are doing very well.
We are doing well. Yeah, we are for peace. Yes.
And my very good brother, Sharif Gali, is the Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana Chamber of Young Entrepreneurs. He's doing very much in that sector as well. Sharif, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Chairman.
I hope you're doing very well.
I'm doing fine. It's been a while, like you said.
The economy is treating you well.
Not well, I can't complain. Yeah. Things are going well. Yes.
I'll come back to you again, though. But let me go online now and welcome the Chief Economist of PIED, Daniel Amate Enim. Daniel, good evening. And thank you very much for joining us, if you can hear me.
Yeah, good evening.
I hope you are doing very well as well.
By God's grace, I'm doing very well.
Right. So I was going to put on the screen a bit of the slides from the Ministry of Finance's release, but I don't know if you've read it already. Okay, so I have it on the screen. I'll read just a few paragraphs. So the point number 3, as the producer has put on the screen, I'll go through it very quickly. It says, today we are launching a similar invitation to exchange, and this is in follow-up to all the arrangements that the government of Ghana through the Ministry of Finance has done. We've seen some people who didn't subscribe to the domestic debt exchange program who keep going to the Ministry of Finance to request for their funds and to request for their yields when their programs do mature. And those who signed on to the domestic debt exchange program, this is a new form for those who have theirs in dollar denominations. And so this is what it says from the Ministry of Finance. Today we are launching a similar invitation to exchange, this time in respect of the US dollar denominated bonds issued domestically. So you have to take key notes of all the words that are used here. It is not an external bond, it's a local bond, but they are issued domestically and in dollar denominations by the Republic of Ghana and governed by the Ghanaian law. So for the avoidance of any doubt, this invitation is separate from the invitation to exchange launched or to the exchange launched in December 2022 and concluded in February 2023 and does not involve any GAS denominated securities. That's a Ghana cedis, I want to think. Denominated securities. So their point number 4. The reasons justifying the invitation to exchange launched in December 2022 remain valid today and continue to justify the domestic debt exchange program. The successful completion of this program will allow our country to restore sound public finance and sustainable debt levels and kickstart economic growth following the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the global economic shock created by the war in Ukraine. Let me just read this one. The invitation to exchange is an arrangement through which the holders of eligible bonds will submit their holdings of eligible bonds governed by the Ghanaian law and denominated in the US dollars for new benchmark government of Ghana bonds denominated in US dollars. I'm sure, these are the procedures. And so the 2 paragraphs that are most important for me now are the points 3 and 4, which we have read. But Doc, let me begin with this question, whether you anticipated or expected that there will be a new debt exchange program in this particular IMF program.
Thank you very much. The whole IMF transaction, the Ministry of Finance has not been too transparent in terms of the conditionalities, in terms of what as a nation we are supposed to do in relation to debt sustainability. So from where we sit, we've been anticipating this kind of move, but as it stands, to me, it's not too much of a news because it is clearly an indication of what the ministry have started. Because even at the time they were doing the city denominated, we were of the view that it could affect. I was initially thinking it will affect probably kind of external bondholders like foreign investors. But as it stands now, from what you just read and what I've just gathered also, it appears that this time around, the focus is there again on domestic investors. But this time around, investors who have invested in dollar-denominated bonds. So to answer you, the only difficulty with this arrangement is that, to my mind, the Ministry of Finance has not been too transparent. They should have communicated same from the beginning. Now, look, the kind of debt arrangement that we currently going through to ensure sound physical and then debt sustainability, there's the need for us to leap into the second phase, and this time around, it could affect dollar-denominated bonds. I think if that was communicated earlier, it will prepare the kind of the mind of investors. But it appears that we'll wake up one day and then the news is investors will be affected in one way or the other. But I must admit that the IMF arrangement comes with certain conditions, and where I see it, key among them have to do with domestic revenue mobilization, and second, how we could deal with our debt stocks, the debt stock sustainability. So probably, as the minister has indicated, hinted, it could be part of the arrangement with the fund. My only worry is the lack of communication right from the beginning, so that we will all, be familiar with the kind of arrangement that the government of Ghana through the Ministry of Finance had with the fund, and investors' preparedness to the kind of arrangements. To me, that lack of communication is not too good. So that's the only challenge. But as it stands now, if that is the condition upon which the funds could be released, then it appears that the ministry would definitely pursue that agenda.
But Doc, are you worried? And would you say that the posture of the Ministry of Finance is worrying, or probably, for want of better words, not too good or say bad, for the fact that I remember clearly that in one of my engagements with you, in an interview with you, you had stated that there was the need for a better consensus building, a better engagement, even before the rollout of the program. The program was rolled out to the surprise of the very people that were supposed to be part of the implementation of the program. We saw the Bankers Association, we saw civil society groups, we saw these institutions that were going to be affected by the program coming up to say, no, we are not going to accept it. We saw GUTA, for example, we saw the Traders Association, for example. And you being in the space of understanding how the implementation process has to go, this is a pure economic program. Are you worried?
Yes, certainly so. And without disrespect for the Honorable Minister, I just like you rightly stated, I indicated that the lack of communication from the Ministry of Finance is quite worrying right from the beginning. And then as it starts now, say, this is a program that is going to affect critical actors within the domestic economy. And there's a need for a clear line of communication, stakeholder consultation, so that at the end of the day, people who may be affected could prepare by way of mitigating whatever impact that government program with the fund will have on their investment. Okay, but that was not done. And I think by now, because if it was not done before, after we have signed on to the fund, the finance ministry could quickly do that by way of engaging stakeholders. But of course, that has been the weakness of the finance ministry to my mind, where they are pushed to the wall, wake up one day, and we could trade this thing from the how do you call it? The time we were introducing the e-levy and etc. So this lack of communication from the finance ministry, and by extension the finance minister, to me, it's not a very good way of managing the situation. You don't just wake up one day and things that will affect the livelihood of people hard-earned investment, and you without any proper consultation, without proper engagement with the stakeholders, you wake up one day and you just announce it. We did same with the first arrangement, and we all saw what happened from the critical stakeholder. The bankers couldn't talk because of the regulator, which is the Bank of Ghana. But as it stands now, we all know that they were hugely and adversely affected by that particular arrangement. And I've indicated that this kind of exercise, if it is not properly managed, it could diminish investors' confidence within the domestic economy, and that may not be too good for the economy going forward. And that's the reason which I've been calling for the finance ministry to kind of engage stakeholders in this particular arrangement. Once again, they have failed to do that. It is quite unfortunate.
Look, allow me to come back to the studio. I'll come back to you and ask you about how it's going to impact the business community and the entire economy, and whether because of the IMF program there will be some sustenance in businesses and so on and so forth. But let me come to the businessman in the studio here. Mr. Joseph Paddy is a PRO for Guta. Let me first ask the same question I asked Doc. Are you surprised? Were you expecting or anticipating anything of the sort?
No, I think Doc have said it all. That is our challenge, where there's no stakeholder engagement. That is the serious challenge the trading community is having. So that if we're able to engage your stakeholders, and then the businessman will be able to project or plan. But where policy are slapped on you with that engagement, he said, worrying situation. You remember in recent time, when they were introducing these new taxes, we resisted it because there was no stakeholder engagement. You're asking us to move from importation to production. And if you are coming out with new taxes on production, excise duty, it's a worrying situation. Already we are saying cost of doing business in the country is extremely, extremely expensive. Cumulatively, our tax rate, when you look at the sub-region, our tax rate is extremely high. Now if you go to the port, cumulatively, we are paying about 51%. So just imagine you brought a goods of $10,000.
On your importations?
Yes.
51%?
Yes, $10,000, you are paying about $5,000 as duty. So you go to the banks right now, the policy rate is about 29.5%. The interest rate is about between 35 to 40%. So you go and borrow 100,000 Ghana cedis from the bank to trade or to do business, and per annum you are paying about 40,000 Ghana cedis. So which means that businessman needs to make profit over 60,000 or 80,000 to even pay the overhead cost before you pay his facility. So these are the situation we find ourselves. So that all that we're asking for, let there be stakeholder engagement, so that your stakeholders can make input into your policy and your program, and then we all run with it. But as it stands now, when policies are slapped on the people, we always resist it. And these are the difficult situations. And as it stands now, businessmen and women, I told you that when you go to the port, my brother, it's a worrying situation. We're losing business to our neighboring countries. The port is empty. The people are invited recently. We want to find out why the port is, people are not importing. But as the situation stands now, when your interest rate is extremely high, your policy rate is high, exchange rate is high, $1 to $12. Now it's been stabilized for some few months, but we expected it to come further down because you pick it from 4 cities. Now it's almost 12 times 2. Just imagine you cleared a car that costs about 16,000, and now you are clearing the same car about 41,000. And you are
the
buying
same car, the same brand, the same year, the same
now,
capacity.
Ask everybody. I cleared a Toyota Yaris recently, and I paid about 41,000 Ghana cedis.
Toyota Yaris.
Yaris. A car that used to be sold for about 65,000. Now you go and buy Yaris for 100 and something thousand.
Toyota Yaris.
Yes. It's worrying. So our rate, the tax rate, is high in this country. Now, when you look at inflation rate around us, Ghana, we are heading almost about 42%. Our neighbors are about 5 to 10%. Most of them say they want to bring that to mop up liquidity in the system. Well, there's no liquidity in the system. So what are you mopping up? You see, when you position your rate at this position, it's difficult for business community to thrive and drive. So you see that businesses in the country are not growing. Businesses in Ghana businesses are bleeding seriously. When you come to the marketplace, morals are down, businesses are down. And so government policy to grow business is what we're looking for. I believe government, your position is not only in revenue mobilization, but you also have to facilitate trade and businesses. So when businesses grow, you can get the needed revenue to develop the country. But in this case, just imagine which businessman will sell a Yaris and make a profit of 40,000. It's not possible. But government is taking about 41,000 from you. So he's making even money more than you, the businessman. So due to the
this is scary. Toyota Yaris.
Yes, it's a fact. If you, I'll open my phone and show you my duty papers right now. It's a fact. That's everybody. That's true. When we're enjoying the benchmark value, they gave some 30% rebate. And then when they took it off, it has skyrocketed with coming in with the exchange rate that has moved from 6 to about 12. So it's about 100%. So these are the difficult situations the business community finds itself. And therefore, there's no way businesses will grow. Government will pretend to be taking the revenue, but it's only the same few 30% people who are in the tax net who are suffering this plight. So it's a worrying situation in the country.
Let me come to you, Sharif. And you are building entrepreneurs in Ghana. You are supporting them to access finance. You are supporting them to start up their businesses. You are supporting them in various ways. that the economy can grow. And all of us are in support because we believe that that's the way to go for people to become entrepreneurs and business owners and men of their own. Is this worrying for you? Were you expecting a new program, first of all? And the situation we are in the country, is it worrying for you or we are on? It's good.
So first of all, thank you very much. And to speak on our domestic debt, for me, I think that whatever we can do as a state to be able to cushion ourselves on our domestic burden is very important. And I think that introducing the domestic debt program wasn't entirely a very bad one to all of us who hold bonds. Bringing your old bonds in exchange of new bonds that may have lower interest rate is not a bad attempt by a government. However, the complexity and the non-consultation with stakeholders were actually the big thing. Then coming back to your next question, which is the environment at the moment, how does it look for businesses, especially those that are growing? So you can hear from Guta, if they are the ones the young people or the startups look up to are struggling, then that tells you the story for those coming up is nothing to write home about. It doesn't look so well at the moment with policies put in place to support entrepreneurship. So one thing I believe is that this current government brought up some few interventions with support from development partners like the World Bank and the rest. You know what GA is doing with funding, they are doing with technical support, access to market. NEIP is also doing the same thing. But we forget one critical thing that is what is affecting us. Because if you really want to support, especially what the finance minister said in November about transforming Ghana to an entrepreneur nation, then you need to really look at the chain of the support. If you come and provide funding to businesses, you provide technical support to them like GA does, train people all around, NEIP do the same thing and other agencies. But you forget to put in policies that will augment those support, then you are doing nothing. Because here's the case, you support them with the businesses, but you go and increase your interest rate, policy rates being increased. So at the end of the day, it's the same circle you are running, giving me the money, I go back to buy the same product, they have increased. And I cannot increase. I can't even scale up because I will still be at the same point. And like he said, it's just a small circle that will still be paying the taxes. And the ones that are supposed to be introduced is not happening. So we need to coordinate our support. We need to really understand the areas that are important. Is it all about giving the funding? Is it only about the technical support and the access to market? Or is it about connecting all of this to the policies we put in place? You don't come and give me something in my right and take it back with the left. And that is the situation we are facing. So with that, we do our best as trade associations, as private entities. But then our best can only go far when government is deliberate about supporting the startup ecosystem, the young entrepreneurs, by ensuring that we connect policies to the physical interventions government provide. And this is where we are. Because I know you would ask me that. There are so many interventions happening. Yes, they are. But the connection is not there. You give the intervention, but then people are borrowing, as he said, about 32% interest rate. How do you expect them to scale up? You can give them billions of cedis, but then still cost of input, variable input is increasing, so they can't scale up. They will be in the same circle because all the money will be spent on the inputs they are going to buy that has been increased by 100 and 200%. That is the situation we are now. From the two of you, it's scary. But let me divert a bit and come back to the debt exchange, and I'll now come properly into the business. That for you, this will impact you positively or negatively. So most likely, I would say that whatever that decisions that are taken, especially with respect to the domestic debt, right? The new. So if you look at the constituents I work with, most likely most of them are not bondholders. They are struggling young entrepreneurs. So you may not see the direct bearing effect on them. However, one thing we always forget is that what happens at the top layer trickle down to
exactly when they buy in dollars. I'm particular about them because they are working with dollars.
They bring in all of these things. So now look at what he's saying. I'm also afraid that I was even planning to buy a Yaris to do Uber business. Now I can imagine. So
now I'm sitting down thinking if you are a salaried worker, you are thinking of a second income, and you are planning to save some amount of money to get into business and become an entrepreneur. You may never be able to become.
That's challenging. It's a worrying situation. Very difficult.
You may have to rethink.
Yes.
Because I don't want to discourage anybody from becoming a business person, but just understand that the environment is not that
prices are going down, going up every now and then, and
every day skyrocketing. Like he's saying, Yaris is now sold at 100 to 150,
which is scary.
Yes. So the last time you told me you wanted to start your Uber business, I think that you may have to, because those days you could use
if you had 100,000, you could buy three.
About three.
Three Hyundai i10 or
so that
Picanto or so.
That is the situation.
And now you can't even buy one. That's why
you can't even buy one. Yes, you can't even buy one. You see,
let me go to Doc and come back. And Doc, before I come to you, I have some slides to show on the budget. I mean, from last year's budget. And because of what's happening now, we don't know how all of this is going to tie into the media review budget and how it's going to play out, how the performance has been so far for the first 6 months, and how, with the introduction of this new debt exchange program, the budget is going to look. So I'll put up the slides, Doc, and then I'll come back to you. Number 67 of last year's budget said, in the spirit of burden sharing, the National Fiscal Stabilization Levy, NFSL, will be converted into a Growth and Sustainability Levy, GSL, to cover all entities. Category A entities comprising those currently paying the NFSL and 6 additional sectors will have to rate of 5% on profits before tax. Category B, comprising all other entities with the exception of the extractive sector, will have a rate of 2.5%. Category C, comprising entities operating in the extractive sector, will contribute up to 1% of production to the levy. As a first step, the electronic transfer levy headline rate will be reduced to 1% of the transaction value alongside the removal of the daily threshold. I mean, we can jump all of these and come to you, Doc. So if you can hear me, Doc, let's see with all of the things that we have put up. Okay, so these are expenditure figures. Let me see if I can run quickly through them. Key expenditure measures will also be pursued to support the fiscal consolidation process. In this regard, the following expenditure measures are proposed. Reduce the threshold on earmarked funds from the current 25% of tax revenue to 17.5% of tax revenues. Migrate all earmarked funds into the GIFMS platforms and ensure they use the GIFMS platform to process all their revenue and expenditures transactions. The reform should be completed by the end of 2023 and double the NEIP payment per beneficiary household from the current 45 Ghana cedis per month to 90 cedis and increase number of beneficiary households from, well, this is something I think it's in the public space already. Doc, let me come to you on this one. How do you think, or what exact expectations are you expecting from the media review budget? We are expecting it before the end of this month.
Yeah, thank you very much. Where I sit and the kind of arrangement we have with the fund, my expectation is that 2 critical things are likely to form the core of the mid-year budget review. That is 1, revenue mobilization, and number 2, domestic debt sustainability. I suspect that if care is not taken, we may see certain upwards adjustment in some of the tax rates that we have already been paying, and then the business community is already complaining. Because I suspect one of the critical things that the fund may have requested government to work on has to do with beefing up domestic revenue mobilization, and number 2, find a way of minimizing the debt stock. And then that's the reason which probably the minister have hinted that there is going to be a second deficit program. They've been a little bit quiet in respect of the taxes, because if any hint should come from that place, probably the business community may react sharply. But I suspect that the mid-year budget review will not offer any good news in terms of mitigating the blights of the business community. However, it's going to focus more on how government is going to reposition itself by way of beefing up revenue mobilization and also reducing debt stock. So I wouldn't be surprised to hear the finance minister announcing some upwards adjustment or even in an attempt to reduce an existing tax rate, the net or the resultant effect will mean that consumers or customers or the business community may end up even paying more. Just like they did for the e-levy, reduce the rate to 1%, of course, but it cut across regardless of whatever transaction. So at the end of the day, government gets more revenue. So as much as it has been reduced to 1%, it affects the value of whatever transaction that you do as a consumer. So these are some of the technical things that I suspect the finance minister would like to will bring on board.
Do you have any specific area that you think, or any specific budget item or maybe tax item that may be increased?
Specifically, I've not done any analysis that, and I don't want to preempt.
But you suspect that by all possible means there will be a recalibration of a tax.
Certainly so. That is the suspicion, because the revenue mobilization is quite key on agenda. If you want, you see, having received the first tranche of the money, and then somewhere in October, November, the fund will be coming for a review. And that review is largely dependent on this particular budget review. And they expect the government to put certain mechanisms in place by assuring the fund for a second release, another 600 million or so, because it is expected that by the end of 2023, we should be able to get about 1.2 billion USD. So the issue of revenue mobilization, where I see it and the kind of analysis I'm doing, I think is very key. And if there could be possibility of government even having to minimize certain social intervention that the government have been doing. So I suspect the issue of the free SHS, there should be some review in terms of the kind of support that government is giving to that particular project, so to speak, or program. And I also strongly suspect that government's subvention to some of the critical social facilities like the utility could also be affected, that citizens will be allowed to even pay the full cost of electricity, water, etc. Or we could expect an increase in this particular sector, or in a way of ensuring that government mobilizes enough revenue, minimizes its expenditure, and be able to run with the program, so that at the end of the day, we'll be able to get the second tranche of the fund. So to me, the budget review is going to center on how government is going to mobilize revenue and how government is going to deal with the debt asset program. Yes, in terms of expenditure, government has done some kind of arrangement by, in terms of practical implementation of same has been a challenge, because one of the things that we have been finding difficult to deal with have to do with the internal control weaknesses within the public sector financial administration mechanism. And here I'm referring to the kind of financial waste in the system, financial malfeasance, etc. As it stands now, we're struggling to deal with the public sector wage bill because of ghost name and etc. So these are some of the things that, of course, the fund would have expected the government to also handle. Yes, the minister will again come out with how they're going to address that. But the easiest way for all of them, just like my colleagues in the studio have rightly indicated, is to target those who can easily be spotted, so to speak. Those who are already paying the taxes. It's become very easy for government to kind of put them in the tag again and get some money from them, rather than expanding the tax network to be able to bring more people on board. And that has been a challenge. So to my mind, I'm of the view that the review budget will certainly touch on taxation, and it's not going to be a reduction. Or alternatively, government may come out with another innovative mechanism that will call on all Ghanaians, once again, for all of us to swallow the bitter pill by ensuring that we go by that program, by that particular policy, so that at the end of the day, the economy is salvaged and we bring about macroeconomic stability.
Okay, let me come back to the studio. Let me come back to the studio because it's very hard to take. We are all in high anticipation, but let me come to you.
I think I want to move away from Doc's position. We don't expect any new introduction.
You are not expecting any new tax.
But
from Doc's argument, it is easy to deduce that there are conditions to premise the release of the remaining funds.
That's IMF condition.
IMF condition,
mobilize
and
funds.
we need those remaining funds. And looking at the posture of the Ministry of Finance, by not releasing the information en bloc, releasing it in bits, it is possible that there is a request for an increment in some tax for the release of those funds. So there is the possibility of...
so we're also sending a message to the Minister of Finance to halt those areas.
You are not expecting...
We are not expecting any new tax, if anything at all. Guta, we don't only complain, we also bring proposals and solutions. For example, we propose that to widen the tax net, there are most of Ghanaians, businessmen who are not into the tax bracket, especially when it comes to VAT issue. So that's why we came up with this proposal of upfront VAT at the port. So if you import, upfront you pay some VAT. And because of that program, most people are now, applying for VAT and to be registered. So this is a one way to open and widen the tax net. So let's look for how to widen the tax rather than to impose more taxes on the people who are already in the net. I guess about 30% people, and the 70% are outside the net. So what do we do to bring the 70%? When we're able to bring even 30 of the 70, we can get the needed revenue. So we don't expect any new introduction, if anything at all. We expect some of the taxes that are already in existence, that we call them the nuisance taxes, but to get rid of. For example, we've spoken about COVID-19 levy. 1%, that tax must go because it has outlived its usefulness. Yes, it must go. There's a special levy, 2%. When they say when the sun sets, they're going to take it out at the port. Till date, since 2013. The sun has not set yet. We are still paying for it. These are the worries. We expect the minister to come and tell us the ways and means that is going to give us a cheaper interest rate, credit borrowing, what interest we are going to get. Because no businessman can survive under this dispensation going to borrow at the rate of 35 to 40% and stay in business. It's not possible. Per annum, it's not possible. So what is the minister doing so that he makes sure that we have cheaper credit for the business community to grow their business? Then you can get the needed revenue, but not adding on. Once upon a time, we call them nuisance taxes. And we could see that they are now resurfacing in another form, which is a worrying situation to the business community. So we are not expecting any new introduction of new taxes in the mid-year review, but rather what is government going to do to give us cheaper credit to apply our businesses? These are some of the areas we're looking for. What is government doing to make sure inflation comes? Because if our neighboring countries are enjoying about 5 to 10% inflation rate, it's possible that we can also come to about, compared to ours, about 42. It's on the higher policy rate, 29.5%. It's on the higher side. So no businessman can grow under this condition. The cost of doing business, especially in our port, that's where my interest is. It's extremely high.
And
so
you had made a case. I don't know whether that's true. Somebody sent a message that the containers that come to the port have been at least halved in the last few months.
More than halved. I went to the port about a month ago. Gapua used to clear over 100 and something containers per day. Now go to the airport. We got to the port around 12. Before 4, we were able to come out. There's no containers at the port. But go to our neighboring countries, go to Togo, go to Benin, go to Nigeria. They apply. All the inland countries that they used to apply with Mali and all those countries at the Sahara areas who used to apply our port, no longer apply our port because cost of doing business at our port is now you pay for a container, a 40-footer container, you are paying a service fee to the shipping lines over 12,000 Ghana cedis. Over 12,000 Ghana cedis. So these are so cumulatively, when you put all this together, just before you can clear one container, you are spending. So now the only goods that come to the country now are consolidated goods and personal effects. So, but the real business goods, I have a friend who used to import this second clothing. He said the last time he imported from the UK, he spent about £40,000. At the end of the sales, he made about 41,000. So
for the entire period that he got into
it. So he has resolved to keep his money at the bank. And look at the number of people he has cut out of business, like my brother said. Because a lot of people depend on, he even supplied to Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast and stuff. So just imagine the number of people who are going to go out of business as a result of the decision he has taken, because he's not going to import. So we are not just saying for saying sake, but it's a condition on the ground, the reality on the ground, the reality in the market. Now, when you come to market, the morale is down, people are just sitting down there doing nothing. And it's worrying. And as a result of that, the rate at which the youth are leaving the country is worrying. You see, we are losing human resources as a result of these challenges we find ourselves. Serious human resources that we are losing, not only in the medical field, but in almost all the fields. We are losing the human resources. But look at the natural resources that are around us. And if we lose all the human resources, who will take off our natural resources, then we are in trouble. You see, it's a worrying situation.
Let me come to you with the same point, and what the budget should look like for you. I mean, those in the entrepreneurship space, with all of the things that are happening. Doc had said that he expects either new taxes or some of the existing taxes to be increased and per the conditions of the IMF. I mean, and in anticipation, though. But for you in the entrepreneurship and startup space, what's your expectations?
So once again, thank you. Like my brother from Guta said, we would like to move away from Doc's. Okay, well, that's not Doc's position, but that's his anticipation. So we are not anticipating same. Are
you sending a message to the Ministry of Finance that if they are planning to increase any of the line items,
they should go back
in taxation,
plan.
they should revise their notes. Is that their position?
Exactly so.
Or you don't believe that it will happen, as Doc is saying?
Well, we don't expect it to happen.
So we don't expect it to happen. And then we expect that already what is in the domain and the businesses are battling with, we even expect downwards, if possible, not to increase. But like Doc said, because of IMF agreement, it is eminent that there may be upwards adjustment in some of the policies, especially when it comes to taxation. But then it would not be a good thing for businesses at all, because already businesses are folding up because of the little increments that were done. Now, if there's any upward adjustment, I think that is a big disaster. One thing I would like to say is that for our managers of our economy, they should be very sensitive to the business ecosystem at this particular moment. So whatever you are bringing on board, no matter the agreement you've signed, be very sensitive and deliberate in supporting your ecosystem. Because, mind you, if we are not able to fight our import bill to reduce it, and we have been struggling over years to be able to promote domestic production, and we are not achieving that, then you don't put a lot of burden on the small businesses that are struggling already. When you do that, you are completely crippling your next engine, which is the private sector. So policies, if there should be anything, let us be sensitive on any upwards adjustment on taxes that will affect businesses. My other anticipation, from where I come from, Akwesi, is that what happens, I would like to hear from the finance minister, if he's listening or watching now. I want to know what happens to the 10 million for 1 million jobs and the U-Start. And I want to put it before you today. Anybody watching you can get back to you. The 10 million U-Start project, which was supposed to be launched, part of it was to work with commercial banks that will give loans to youth, young people at a moderate rate.
Is it not happening yet? Is it not?
I want to put it to you that there is no bank in Ghana that has given any single loan under U-Start. Can put it on record.
There is no single bank in Ghana
that has given any loan under U-Start.
But the NEIP is operating.
NEIP is not a bank. NEIP has an aspect.
NEIP is supposed to do that facilitation.
The social aspect of it. Even with them, it has not started yet. They are now about to start it. Imagine last year, now into this year, that's almost like a 1.5 years.
Have you engaged the NEIP?
No, I work with them. I know what NEIP is. You see, it's an agency. So if they don't have the resources, they don't have the power to do anything. So I will not sit here and fault them. But it's the whole structure issue. GEA uses their.
So let's situate it well.
Yes.
NEIP is in place. It is supposed to facilitate. I mean, this is news. We may want to talk about it on a different day.
Yeah.
However, let's just clear it in 30 seconds. NEIP is not receiving the needed support from the Ministry of Finance or from who to be able to implement the project. Because they are supposed to facilitate it with the banks to give the people the money. The monies are sitting with the banks. And they are charging interest rates.
So
why are they not giving them out?
They haven't gotten the needed funding in time, because if they had gotten it, we would have seen action, right? Because the guys at NEIP are people who are hard workers. And if they have the
who have done it before anyway.
They have done it before. They have the experience. So if they've gotten the funding from central government, by now they would have implemented. So I would want to see that a lot of update on the 1 million, 10 billion to 1 million. Just how many jobs have we created actually with this YouStart project? And then I see one thing that I also want to, I would like to hear more about is that if you want to build a sustainable entrepreneurship ecosystem or nation, then you need to go back to the drawing board to focus on the basis. We talk about technical support to businesses. How are we providing that? We talk about funding. Yes, there have been so many announcements of funding and so many things happening from NEIP and GEA and the rest. Can we really measure the impact? What are the real businesses that are supported? How are they using that businesses? How are they employing for us to achieve that 1 million? You see, we don't look at those things. We are just happy that we have given 10,000 businesses, and that is all, but we don't measure the impact. I would like to see a lot of update on that. I am talking about update, and I want to see the future plan for especially the YouStart. I talk about the YouStart, and I'm passionate about it because of the future. He just mentioned a lot of young people are leaving Ghana, and it's true. If you have a friend who is running any travel agency, call him and ask, how many requests are they having? A lot of young people want to leave because when we ask them to say, hey, stay, you start a business, you get support, they tell you so many reasons they can't get the support, and it is not our doing. We need to come together, private sector and government, to be able to support our young people. So YouStart was a very brilliant thing, and if we are really serious about it, it will change the face of our young people and their future.
Let me quickly run to Doc. Unfortunately, we are actually running out of time. But Doc, if you can hear me, are there any recommendations you would want to give if the Ministry of Finance or anybody at all is watching you tonight? They are by this time crunching the numbers and putting together lots of figures and so on and so forth, and also looking for ideas, I'm sure. What would be your recommendation, briefly?
Right, thank you. Yes, the first thing after the consultation with the critical stakeholders I have indicated over the period, and I have repeated same tonight, it is very key and critical. Just like Mr. Paddy and then my other brother from the Young Entrepreneurs Chamber also indicated. Once you engage them, you are able to come to an equilibrium position where you now appreciate what they're going through. And even if because of IMF funds that we need to be able to stabilize the economy, there's a way of communicating and there's a way of ensuring that you mitigate the kind of impact that the policy may have on their businesses. So these are some of the things. Now, the second recommendation, which my brother said, and I think is very key, that's have to do with the YouStart. When the YouStart was announced, I said it's a very brilliant idea on paper, but implementation is the issue. The reason which government couldn't execute it efficiently, if we recall, when it was announced, the finance minister stated that 70% of the 10 billion will come from the private sector. So if you have your private sector that is already financially handicapped, I used to say financially impotent, so to speak, then they'll find it very difficult to be able to support 70% of your flagship program for the youth. Just like my brother said, we want to hear the finance minister that a certain quantum is going to be committed to the YouStart program so that we get the YouStart program running effectively, targeting young people who are willing to do businesses and expand productive capacity. Because the exodus of our young people leaving the shores of this country is becoming alarming on a daily basis, just like they indicated. People, all that they want to leave this country, and that may be fatal for the development of the country because the human capital is very key and critical to our development. So my submission to Honorable Finance Minister that let us be transparent with the management of the economy. Our dealings with the fund is very important because of where we find ourselves. But in doing so, let us communicate to critical stakeholders. Let's engage so that at the end of the day, you earn the support of all critical stakeholders necessary for the development of this country.
All right. Thank you very much, Doc. Let me come briefly to the studio. Mr. Paddy, I almost called you Doc. I've called you Doc on a number of occasions, but yes. Briefly, from the business point of view,
yes.
What will be your advice?
We're expecting that these 3 newly taxes that was introduced, government should review that policy. That's what we are saying. And recently they passed the Exemption Act 2022, where that's the area we're complaining that government is losing a lot of revenue as a result of these exemptions. Yeah. And then I think when government looks to do it and seal those loopholes and portals, I think we'll get the needed revenue. Because the people will be able, who can afford the taxes are rather given exemptions. And I think I'm going to be a little critical on this area. I expect that our parliamentarians begin to pay duties on their vehicles, and then they will know how it feels like on their Land Cruisers. They let them begin to pay duties on that, and then they'll know how
you are calling for parliamentarians to begin to pay
duties on that. Then they'll know how, because the way they rush in passing these 3 new taxes, and then let's see them pay.
Somebody says we should also look at the free zones authority.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, the exemption and free zone. Right. Yeah, we should look at those areas.
Right.
Yes.
Right. They grant. I mean, the statement is they grant too many exemptions, and it is not helping the economy. Well, let me come to you, Sheriff, and let me round up with you.
So thank you very much, Akwesi. So like I said, USTAT is very important to me and dear to my heart. I would want to see what happened to the 10 billion, whether we didn't get the money, and if we got the money, what is it used for? And aside that, please, let's be sensitive in any adjustment we'll do to taxes. I keep using that word because it's a plea. We are just begging. Because at this moment, if nothing is done and there would be introduction or upward adjustment, well, maybe next time you call me here, I may personally be out of business. I don't know about Mr. Paddy, but
you're not going to be. You are supporting lots of these.
But I also run my business, so I know what it is.
Of course, you are running yours and supporting. If you run out, then everybody else runs out.
So in that regards, let us be sensitive in whatever we are doing, and then let us also be deliberate. I would want to see some deliberate attempt. Yes, IMF requirement may change or may make things a bit stiff for us, but I think that appeal to the finance ministry and the managers of the economy. Let us open up other support systems. Let's increase the access to market for the entrepreneurs. Let's give more funding to the entrepreneurs, and then let us support them with the technical support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Dr. Daniel Amatei Enim is the Chief Economist, PIED. He joined us via Zoom. Doc, we are grateful for your time. Sharif Gali is a Chief Executive Officer, Ghana Chamber of Young Entrepreneurs. Mr. Joseph Paddy is a PRO, Ghana Union of Traders Association. My name is Kwesi Afriye, and of course, I'm your host regularly for Bottomline. Thank you very much, the entire production team. We'll see you next week.